Hi, welcome to 10 Math Minutes, where we learn an effective math strategy in 10 minutes or less to grow your mind and your teaching. I'm Naomi Church with Growing Minds Consulting, and today we're going to be discussing the 3-read strategy. 3 reads is an instructional routine that teaches students to read like a mathematician. So the goal of this routine is to help the kids to really process what they're reading to build their comprehension. We want the students to pay attention to the quantities within a word problem and the relationships that are there. So we know that when it comes to word problems, students can often struggle with visualizing the problem, actually comprehending what's happening within the story and making a visual of that in their head. So this strategy helps students to think through the information and process it to be able to create a visual. It also increases receptive language functions, which is basically our ability to interpret a question or make sense of a situation. And then finally, this strategy really addresses 4 of the math practice standards. So these are the math practice standards with Common Core, and the 3-read strategy will address the first 4 of these. So by using this strategy, students will make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. They'll keep going because they finally have a visual and they're excited to solve the problem. They'll reason abstractly and quantitatively, so they'll really be able to think about what makes sense. They'll construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others, so they'll have a chance to talk and explain their thinking to their peers. And finally, the students will be able to model with mathematics and show their thinking with visuals. So the way this strategy works is that we literally read the math problem 3 times. That's why it's called 3 reads. So in the first read, the students are thinking through, what is this situation about? What is really happening in the story? Then in the second read, they're thinking about, what are the quantities in this situation and how are they related? So I like to tell the kids, this is where they're pulling out all of the mathy stuff. And then in the third read, they're thinking about, what are all the possible mathematical questions we could answer using the available information? So let's try an example. So here's a problem, and we're going to go ahead and do the first read. Maddie and Sydney have some stuffed animals. Maddie has dinos, cats, and monkeys. Sydney has monkeys and whales. So at this point, we would ask the kids, what's happening in the story? If we're doing this online with e-learning, they could unmute their microphones if you're doing this live. They could type into the chat. If you're doing this in a learning management system like Canvas, this could be a discussion where they start to write down what's happening. So here we want to elicit students to say things like, oh, there's these 2 girls and they have stuffed animals. And maybe they even can relate to that, and they start talking about how they have stuffed animals and they know that their friends have stuffed animals. And oh, there's different kinds of animals. They don't have all the same kind. Then we do the second read, and I could ask the students to choral read this. I could call on somebody to read it, and I'm going to make sure that they also have it in print in front of them. So notice this time the numerals are in the problem. During the first read, the numbers were pulled out so that students are just thinking about the situation. Now that we can create a visual of the situation, we add the numbers back in so they can think about the numbers in context. So Maddie and Sydney have some stuffed animals. Maddie has 8 dinos, 11 cats, and 2 monkeys. Sydney has 12 monkeys and 8 whales. So now we're asking the students, what are the numbers in the problem? What do those numbers mean? How are they related? Finally, in the third read, here we have the exact same information as the second read. We have all of the numbers in the problem. We would read it all together. And this time we're talking about what are the questions that we can answer with the information given in the problem. So this is really great. A lot of the fear that students have around math is about getting the right answer. But notice that in all 3 of these reads, there wasn't a question. So this forces the students to create a visual, think about the situation, and then think about the numbers and the relationships without trying to answer a question. Now we want the students to be the ones to generate the questions. So there's several questions that I can ask and answer using the information provided in this problem. And sometimes in assessments, there's extra information. So this is great practice for the kids to create questions where maybe they don't use all of the information given in the problem. So some of the questions that students might generate here are, how many animals does Maddie have? How many animals does Sydney have? Who had more animals? How many animals do they have all together? How many monkeys are there all together? There's a whole bunch of different questions that the students can generate. Then students can split into small groups, and you can have each group choose which question they want to answer. And this is where you really get high engagement by giving them choice. So they can choose which question they want to answer and then work with their group to create a model to show the solution for that. And then you can come back together in whole group and show the different questions, the different visuals and models for the solutions. So students can see that the same information can be used to answer so many different questions. This also helps students to develop a growth mindset because math becomes less about performance and more about critical thinking. You can learn more about 3 reads and other routines for reasoning in Grace, Amy, and Susan's book, Routines for Reasoning. And you can also go to their website at fosteringmathpractices.com. Growing Minds Consulting helps districts and schools meet the varying needs of all learners. We engage and empower educators to reach and teach all learners because effective education is equitable for all. So this strategy, as well as many others, can help close the gap with your struggling students. It helps get all students thinking. You can find out more about Growing Minds Consulting on our website at growingmindsconsulting.com, and you can like us on Facebook.